What is up, my triggers? Eccentrik Hat here. Welcome to another episode of MRAdio. We have a special guest here, Sally Ann, who's setting up a march down in London on the 12th of September. We're hoping for as many people as possible, so please make sure, if you can, that you do turn up. With myself is my co-hosts, Philip and Elizabeth, and of course, Sally Ann herself, who's going to tell us more about the march and her work in this sphere in general. So please welcome Sally Ann.
Hi there, how are you?
It's good to have you here on the show.
Yeah, very pleased to have you here.
So
Thank you. I'm with three amazing people for the looks of it.
It's a privilege to meet you. Because I've only just become familiar with your work based on this march and everything that's going on. So I'm really looking forward to learning all the background details that I'm not yet aware of.
Okay. Yeah, good. I can help you out with that.
So, Sally, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself and about your background, where you're from, and a little bit about your history?
Okay, so I've been delivering services for about 30 years, designed them and delivered them, worked in partnership with too many organisations, local government, national Wales government, lots of stuff I've done. I'm a therapist. I'm doing a journalist degree currently. I'm going into my third year. The background for the march was started about 5 years ago. I'd created a whole family domestic abuse service that wasn't gendered. And the work that I did with that had taken me down a research route I'd never gone before. Took me into layers, whereas before a lot of my work had gone like the first and the second layer, but this particular piece of work really took me down into the layers. So I was looking at statistics, how they were gathered. I mean, lots and lots of information. And after
When you mentioned the layers, can you tell us what the layers are?
Okay, so when you work and deliver services, you operate from the basis of, you start with the acts of law and the government, okay? So you look at legislation and policy, and then that policy influences local strategies. So It leads down into the strategic planning for local authority practices and how they work together. Normally when you deliver procured contracts like I used to run services for local governments, okay? So normally when you deliver those kinds of services, you're aware of the legislation, you're aware of the policy, and you're aware of the strategic planning that local authorities go to. But you don't necessarily look at the layers underneath that, because the services are designed to deliver the local authorities' work. So obviously we look at things like statistics and evidence-based outcomes monitoring, things like that. But they were normally things that are fed to you, because you would be delivering a service that the government wanted. So they would give you what they wanted you to see, and then you design the service from that. So it was rare that I kind of went out of that information and actually delved deep into it myself. So this particular project that I'd done, we'd won £500,000 with Police and Crime Commissioner in South Wales, and also the National Offenders Management Service. We'd designed this programme. We'd been promised £250,000 to do a pilot, an evaluated pilot for it. And they pulled the funding for the pilot halfway through designing it. And as a result, we were left with a product. We managed to get some funding to run a pilot for this project, but it was only 15 families. So we then had to take it into the world. So to do that, I had to start stepping up against female services, because this project, this service was non-gendered. So it was whole family. It didn't matter if the man was the victim or the woman was the victim. And as a result of that, we were getting a lot of pushback from the service community. So to provide the National Assembly for Wales, the Assembly members, information so they would open their doors and listen to me, I put some evidence together that went quite deep. It took me 3 months to do it, and it went quite deep into statistics and how statistics were gathered. And it went past my normal layer. You know, I went down into what statistics were out there for men and boys. Not only that, but how were they gathered? How were these statistics gathered? So I started pulling these layers apart just for that 3 months, and that opens up. I mean, the twilight zone is what I keep saying. It opened the twilight zone for me.
I had a very similar experience recently because we are working on opposing the gendered approach to the domestic abuse bill, and I started looking in similar things, and it's just shocking that everything is all the research is done for the same organizations in a gendered way, and with a focus exclusively on women, but then portrayed as if it was neutral statistics. It's absolutely shocking.
It is. It's one of those moments that can actually spin you around to such a degree you don't know what's north, south, east, or west. And when like me, you're used to delivering services. So I mean, I've spent 30 years in that world, you know, legislation and designing services and looking at procurement needs. And I've helped local authorities and governments to map their needs. So I've been part of that mapping process. But again, we always had certain factors fed to us because we were meeting the government's needs. So, you know, it's a different, and this time was a twilight zone for me. And from there, I just delved into that world, and it took me 4.5 years really. And the end product was the campaign.
Yeah, I mean, the truth of, you know, and it's not only about domestic violence, it's about all kinds of things, you know, education and health and work. The truth is so counterintuitive because from everywhere, you know, from the UN, from the government, from charities, from local councils, from politicians, you know, everyone is or has the same line, you know, that women are suffering most. And you like you say, you start peeling back the layers, and you know, you find that it's just not justified.
Well, there's a very famous quote by George Orwell that says history was replaced by a lie, and people forgot that the lie was told, and so the lie became the truth. You know, so I mean, so, you know, it's incredibly common psychology that if you can repeat something often enough, regardless of the evidence or the lack of evidence to support it, people will just feel that it's intrinsically true because they've heard it from so many different sources.
Oh yeah, absolutely. One of the things I really like about your project, Sally-Ann, is you know, the fact that it's headed by a lovely woman such as yourself is really nice, you know. And also, you know, you've got the T-shirts that you want people to wear on the march, and there's the I'm supporting him and I'm supporting her. And I think, you know, for me, one of the best decisions that Mike Buchanan made as leader of Justice for Men and Boys was to add the brackets and the women who love them. You know, I think it's so important that we do have a united, you know, men and women working together, which is the other great organisation that uses, you know, that kind of idea and really presents it and celebrates the fact that this is about all of us, you know, because if any time that a man is discriminated against, you know, anytime he suffers unnecessarily, there's a whole host of women around him who suffer indirectly.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the key points of the campaign research for me was there was a moment right there in the middle that I realized that while the current figures are 869,000 men, I believe, or somewhere around that figure for men who are experiencing domestic abuse in the UK, I sat in the chair and realized, because obviously, you know, the media and women's projects will want you to believe that those men are in same-sex relationships. Well, that's actually simply not true, and that's all there is to it. But when you've got that amount of men who are experiencing that abuse, you've got the similar amount of women who are abusers. And I've had women begging me for services to assist them to stop their abusive behaviour, and there is nothing out there. So when we don't recognise that men are being abused, we are also sidelining women who are those abusers, and there is nothing out there, you know.
One of the guys I'm working with in GenderParityUK, he actually provides a service. It's called Temper, and he started a service hotline and a service for female perpetrators. And he had the first couple of women. He only just started, I think, 2 weeks ago, and he had the first few women contacting him. And that's the thing with organizations like Women's Aid and Refuge that deny the existence of female perpetrators. They hurt women with that as well. And their children and families. Everybody needs to heal. And we're really in this gender war, and nobody on our side wants a war. We want just peace. Yeah, exactly. We just want peace. And I would say even like all the people, I don't know how much you know about the manosphere, but even people like MGTOWs and incels, and I think almost all of them, they don't want a gender war. They are just too freaked out of what's going on. They're like, this is too unsafe. They leave the battlefield. And it's like, instead of just saying, we are made to be partners. And we are made to support each other. And in the last 30, 40 years, we're just tearing each other apart, and society pitches us against each other. And that's what I really see exemplified in the domestic abuse sphere. It's that us against them, instead of every victim counts. It's insane. I can't understand it. It's
sorry.
Sorry, Sally Ann. The truth is, I mean, we get told by feminist historians or herstories or whatever that history has just been, men have been privileged all throughout society, in every culture, in every part of the world, in every time period. But the truth is that it's always been and always has the same roots of a tiny minority of very privileged, incredibly wealthy, powerful people have the privileges, and everybody else is scrabbling for scraps. And even when you try to say that, like it's not men versus women, it's a tiny minority of powerful elites and everybody else. But you will still get the answer, yeah, well, men still had more scraps. And it's also, I would say, it's quite homophobic, the fact that they won't recognize the female abusers, because so many lesbians are being thrown under the bus. They are the sacrificial lamb, and this is what I mean when I say that feminism is incredibly misogynistic, because to push its agenda, it does throw as many women as it needs to under the bus. I mean, women who support pro-life are always thrown under the bus, because it's painted as something that men are trying to do to women, not something that one side of society agrees with and one side of society doesn't agree with. And yeah, to suggest that the only people abusing men are other men is homophobic. It's putting a stereotype on gay men that's not actually fair.
Yeah, because as far as I know, gay relationships have actually the lowest percentage.
Lowest, right?
Domestic
Gay men do. Lesbian relationships have the highest. Gay men have the lowest. And as I said, it's they will put rainbow flags on their windows, and they will talk down to you, and they will preach, and they will be pious and snobby and arrogant. But when push comes to shove, they don't care, and they never have.